Good evening. Hi and welcome. I'm Mark Chapin Johnson, and I'd like to welcome you to the Nixon Presidential Library for a very, very special evening. Thank you all for showing up and turning out. I'm going to be very, very pleased. This is a very special opportunity for me to introduce somebody to you that I've gotten to know over several years. The introduction is not about me, it is really about our guest. You're not here to hear me, but I have to share a little bit of insight in my experience so that you'll understand this lady who's going to speak with you. And first of all, you'll notice that she's dressed in pink tonight. We did not coordinate, but for those of you several of you that I know, I never thought I'd have the opportunity again in my life to wear this tie. This tie is the very special, memorable Mitt Romney presidential tie from the campaigns. Yes. So thank you, Ann. So it's actually a twofer for me tonight. Besides being able to wear the tie, I can share some personal insight. I could tell you all the things about Ann, most of which you already know, either from the book or from the biographies you've read. Born in Detroit, met Mitt at a young age, made a number of changes in her life, had 5 sons, all of whom I've had the privilege of getting to know to one degree or another over the years. And why is that important? I didn't meet Mitt Romney through politics. I'm a trustee at Stanford at the Hoover Institution, and I met Mitt about 11 years ago, 12 years ago now. And I met him in an academic sense. And what I'm going to share with you will not surprise most of you. I've been involved in a lot of campaigns, and he was speaking to a board meeting at Hoover in the snow and the ice in February in Washington, D.C. And I listened to him give an impromptu speech for about 30 minutes to a small board luncheon. And what's that got to do with Ann? Well, I'm getting there. I listened to him for about 20 minutes as a board member, and I thought, I've never told you this, Ann. Either he is one of the most slick politicians I've ever heard, and I've known many, which means I have no interest in getting to know him. And he was then the governor of Massachusetts. And then the other side of my mind said, if this gentleman is as real as he appears to be, I'd like to get to know him. I was in the middle of, I'd sold all my businesses, I was going to graduate school. I thought I'd like to get to know, to see who this guy really is. I had the opportunity, I flew back, I met him. I spent 2 hours with him one-on-one, and he talked to me about foreign policy. He talked to me about the Middle East. He talked to me about economics and free markets, things that I was interested in. And it turned out to me that he had one of the most remarkable critical thinking skill sets that I've ever met in my life. That's why I got involved in his political campaigns. And that leads to Ann, because when I got to know Mitt and I traveled around the country with him, I realized that Ann was always there. And I got to know Ann. But more importantly, this is the part that will surprise her, I think, I got to observe Ann. So what I'm going to share with you isn't about her school. It's, yes, she finally worked extra several years and got her degree from Brigham Young in Utah in French and literature, and that's all wonderful stuff. But I saw something. I joked with people on both campaigns. For those of you that know me from Orange County, I'm your friendly Episcopalian, going around to all my Catholic and Jewish friends, trying to help a Mormon through 2 presidential campaigns. Thank you. But why did I do that? And this is where it comes to Ann, what she's doing now, which I'm going to let Ann describe to you what she's doing with the Ann Romney Center for Neurologic Research. It's extraordinary. I know what she's been through personally, but more importantly, what I want to share with you is what I believe the legacy is that she's leaving. The legacy that Ann Romney is leaving is so extraordinary, and it's the one that's not focused on or understood that much. It's 5 children. It's 5 daughters-in-law, and I lose track. Is it 23 or 28 now? 23 grandchildren. And what I saw, and this is the important part of the legacy that I wanted to explain to you as I introduced her. I watched this family. I watched Ann as the bulwark of that family through 2 presidential campaigns. And there was myself and about 10,000 other people all sitting in the back trying to help them. But I got to observe her. I got to observe her children. I got to observe her family. I've been in her homes several times. I have watched how she interacts with everybody. She would treat each one of you in this room one-on-one exactly the way she would treat anyone in her own family. She's the most real, genuine, authentic, caring, remarkable type of person I've ever had the honor and the privilege to meet. So you thought I was talking about Mitt. No, but I'm talking about Ann, really, because what I got out of the Mitt Romney campaigns was the opportunity to meet and get to know one of the most remarkable women that this country has ever had the privilege of getting to know on a larger scale. And I want to suggest to you that the legacy that she's leaving of class, of elegance, of integrity, of realness is something that this country desperately has needed and still needs even more of. And thank you, thank you. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say, because I could go on for a long time and then I'd really get in trouble with people. Let me explain to you how this is going to work now. I'm going to get off the stage. You're not going to see or hear me anymore, which will be fine. And Ann and Cynthia Perazzo are going to come up here and have a discussion about what some of it's already in the book and what you're going to find out about the Ann Romney Center for Neurological Research in Boston. It's going to be a give and take. They're going to talk for about a half an hour. Cynthia is a senior vice president at Hoag Memorial Hospital. Many of us are contributing members there, aren't we? Yes, Hoag. And they're going to have a discussion, and then at the end of that discussion, there's going to be opened up for questions from you folks. And with that, ladies, please come up. Ann Romney.
Good evening. It's my honor to get to have this conversation with Mrs. Romney here with you. So I had an opportunity to read the book, and if you haven't finished reading it yet, you should stay up late tonight because it is inspiring and an important contribution to our society. So thank you for your bravery and your inspiration for writing this book. You know, what struck me right off the start was the title. Tell us about how you picked the title for this book.
Okay, that very important. On the campaign trail, Mark would be there with us at times. No matter where we went, there would always be someone, either in a wheelchair, a walker, or a cane, that would have been waiting for maybe hours. And when I would get there, they would collapse because they were holding up so much, and they came and they showed up for me. And every single time I would tell them, be strong, I love you, hope is on the way. And this is my love letter. The reason I wrote this book is my love letter for all of those that are suffering and all of those people that had shown up for me. It was my turn to show up for them. And I had been weak, and now I'm strong. And so for me, it's time for me to say, you can lean on me. And the title of the book is interesting. When I first got the diagnosis, and it was in 1998, the doctor had done all the neurologic tests, and I'd failed and everything, and I was really doing poorly. He gave me the diagnosis, and then he kindly left the room, and Mitt and I held each other and we cried. And Mitt said this, he said, Ann, it's not fatal, and we're in this together. I don't care how sick you get, we'll be okay, and we are in this together. So that's where the title of the book came from. But beyond that, as I wrote the book and as I was talking to the publishers, when I was a little embarrassed just to be telling my story, because yes, I struggled, but I haven't struggled like I know some people in life have really struggled. And I was a little embarrassed to think that I would tell this story. And so I said, I want to talk about other people that have had enormous, real trials in their life as well, and include them in this story because it is a story really about the vicissitudes of life. I say to everyone, if you live long enough, everyone will go through a life-altering event that will bring you to your knees. And the message I want to communicate is that all of us need to be each other's angels. And that is those tough moments in life, we need to remember that we are in this together. So it's a double entendre.
It's beautiful. You mentioned that this was your love letter to the rest of us. So everybody wants to know about how did you meet Mitt? How did you come to be married at such a young age? And what are some of the secrets to your long success?
Mitt and I met in high school sweethearts. And I was just turning 16. March 21st was our first date. In April 16th, I turned 16. So my parents weren't going to let me date until I was 16, so they cheated a little bit, and that first date was with Mitt. And it's amazing to fall in love with the first person that you date, but we did, and we had this high school romance, and we knew that we were going to be together forever. I mean, it was one of those things, even in high school. We didn't tell anybody else. We didn't tell my parents, his parents, my friends, his friends. We just knew that we were already going to be together forever. And it was a special, what I think is a special romance. We got married 4 years later to the day, March 21st, 1969. And then 1 year later to the day, March 21st, 1970, our first son was born. So the Ides of March 21st, are very significant for Mitt and I. We don't know what's going to happen this next March. Big things in our life always happen on March 21st. So we've had a wonderful life together, and we've spent a lot of it in Boston. And being a conservative and living in Boston is kind of an interesting experience. And those of you that will read the book will see some of the conflicts I went through by being a conservative and having to face all kinds of challenges to my faith, to my decisions on having children, to my decisions to being a mother, and to being a non-professional for a period of my life, and enormous criticism and judgment during those years. But I was strong and knew what I was doing and totally believed in what was right and what I was about. And it's funny how things come around. And now these people that were so critical of me, and they look at my children and my grandchildren, and they have, really nothing. And they practically cry and say, oh, I wish, oh, I wish. So sometimes wisdom is even in children, and I think I had some, even in making some of the decisions I made early on in my life.
Absolutely. You talk in your book a lot about family. You had to share the news of your disease with your family. And you also talk a lot about the role that you play in your family then and now. Can you talk about how that's changed since you've been diagnosed?
Yeah, it was a very tough, obviously a tough diagnosis. And those of you that know someone with MS will understand the fatigue that you have to deal with. It's not that your leg isn't working anymore, or that's happening, and you're scared. But something else happens where you're so fatigued that the normal things you did in life you can't do anymore. And I was at this point where it was so dramatic, the change in my energy level, that I was barely able to take care of myself anymore, let alone do anything for anyone else. And I try to explain it to people where this is what the fatigue was like, and it was unrelenting, and it was every day from the minute you woke up until the minute you went to bed at night. It never got better. And I used to be a runner, and I run 10Ks, You'd be tired at the end of the race, but you'd wake up in the morning, you'd feel fine. I kept thinking, I'll eat right, I'll get a good night's sleep, and then you'd wake up in the morning, you felt just horrible. It was really discouraging. And it was during this time where a really interesting thing happened to me, is that the disease, I now look back on it and saying it was my cruelest teacher, but what it did to me is it stripped me of my identity. I was Ann Romney, super mom, could do anything, take care of anything, run boards, run the school, run everyone's life, take care of everything. Could do everything. And all of a sudden, I could do nothing. And it was very humbling. And I got to this place, and this is why I wanted to write about it in the book, because I wanted it to be okay for other people that go through this to say, I've been there, I know what it feels like. But I had an identity crisis where I felt worthless and like not worth living, and I was no good to anybody, and I was never going to have another good day in my life, and I was really humbled by it. Now, I will say that Mitt was very critical in this period of time where he said to me, I don't love you because you make good dinners. And I love you for who you are. And that was a really important turning point for me, where I had to accept that I was weak and fragile and not going to be of much good for anybody, but I was still valuable and loved. And that is, again, this is a really important concept that I wanted to communicate in the book, because that's what happens to people that go through a life-altering crisis like this, is that it strips you of your identity. Now, I will say, from a religious perspective, when I look back at that and I have a perspective, what it did for me, it gave me a broken heart. And with a broken heart, it cracked my heart open, and it gave me the ability to love more deeply and to care more deeply. And so that is why I say MS was my cruelest teacher, that it brought me to a different place. And that place that I am in now, I have now looked back and say I'm grateful for the lessons that I learned from being so humbled by this disease. And in addition to that, that led me to wanting to do the Neurologic Research Center, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
We'll talk about that. So looking at you today, it would be hard for us to imagine, where you were when you got diagnosed. And at that point in time, the treatments, there was no standard protocol for treating MS. In fact, there still isn't. So tell us a little bit about that journey that you've been on.
This is now, I know this term now, this isn't the term that they said when they treated me, because it's so cruel. It's diagnose and adios. Now that, unfortunately, is what you hear when you're diagnosed with ALS, because there is no treatment. There were very few treatment protocols at that time, and my doctor said to me, and he was very kind, it wasn't like he was trying to be cruel, he said, you're not that sick yet. And I looked at him and I'm thinking, I can't even get out of bed, and I don't have a good day, and this right leg, it's not even moving, and I'm not bad. What's bad? And he goes, come back when you're really bad. Totally the wrong approach. We now know that. It's now, and thank goodness I went to a new neurologist about 2 months later. I progressed, I had this part of my leg was numb. 2 months later, I was numb all the way to the tip of my toes, all the way to about here, and my right arm, and my right leg. And I was just losing, I was just progressing so fast. And I went to a new neurologist, and he looked at his charts, and he looked at me, and he grabbed me by the arm at 5 minutes after talking to me, and he put me in the infusion chair right 5 minutes from his, we walked down the hallway of Brigham and Women's Hospital, and within 5 minutes I had intravenous steroid treatments, which he now says and it's pretty common knowledge now, you treat early and hard. And that is what saved me. So Dr. Howard Weiner was my neurologist. Dr. Howard Weiner now is the co-director of the Ann Romney Center for Neurologic Research. So good things happen.
You talk a lot in your book about some of the other things that you tried and about your friend of a friend who called and said, can't hurt, might help, just try some things, and some of the things that you did try. And I will say that the description of your relationship with, and I'll say his name,
Fritz Bleichow,
was incredibly moving. So I wish you could share with us a little bit about that.
Well, I hope all of you get the book, and I hope you all read it. But there was, so I had this wonderful, this is so fascinating. Here I am at the most sophisticated research hospital in the world, one of the top, Brigham and Women's Hospital, associated with Harvard Medical School. I'm being treated by the top doctor. And then I go to Utah. Mitt is now called on to rescue the Winter Olympic Games. And we moved there. And everyone assumes, because we're Mormon, that somehow, we live there. I didn't know anybody. I was like completely lost. I didn't even know how to get around. And so it was a really tough move for me because I had just been diagnosed and I was really sick. But someone early on, when I was first diagnosed, I was living in Boston, and some total stranger called me and said, I'm 3 years down the road further than you. Get a piece of paper and pencil out and write down these notes because I'm going to give you some advice. And I did. I got a piece of paper and pencil. I wish I'd saved that note. If we hadn't moved, I'd probably still know where it was. But she told me some interesting things. And she basically said, you've moved into a new body, and your number one job is to take care of that new body. And you've got to figure out all the different limitations that you never had before. And you've got to say no to everything. Get off everything. You want to be on that board, you're on that board. No, I can't do it. Goodbye. And I mean, she was like really forceful about it, and I really appreciated the advice. And then she said, do you have the fatigue? And I'm like, oh yeah, are you kidding? It's terrible. But then she gave me some advice about alternative therapies, and I'm like, it's like hoo-ha for me. I'm like, oh, right. And I'm like, I know, I'm like at Brigham and Women's Hospital. I don't know what you're talking about. That's crazy stuff. Well, fast forward a few months, and the drugs are working. They put me in remission. I'm not having more attacks, but I'm still enormously fatigued. And someone tells me about this German reflexologist. My back had gone out, and so I said, I've tried everything for my low back pain. I'm like, oh, I'll go try him. In his first visit, he treated me for my low back, and he says, you need to come back. And the second visit, he says to me, he's pushing on my feet, which are killing. He's like killing me. He's like, do you have MS? I'm like, wait a second, he's pushing my foot. Like, what does he know about that? And he goes, I treated a woman with MS, and it has I'm getting the same feedback. Your adrenal gland's low, your pituitary gland's shut off, your blah, blah, blah. He went through every organ in my body and told me exactly what was going on. I'm just sitting here going, what is he? There's this 80-year-old German man holding my foot. And he said, at the end of the visit, he said, I can help you. And I believed him. I knew in my heart, I'm like a really tender and sensitive person. I knew he was telling me the truth. I spent the next 3 years, the whole time we were in Salt Lake, 3 times a week, 2 hours each visit with this old German man crunching my foot. And over a period of months, I started to feel better, like more energy. And he not only did reflexology, we did acupressure, we did yoga breathing, we did all sorts of things. So he really took me under his wing. So I had the best Western medicine, and then I had this crazy old German man crunching my feet. And after 3 years, I was feeling almost normal. It was amazing. It was very incremental. It was very slow. But I had to, in writing the book, I had to tell the truth about what really happened. And I have to say, my Western doctors in Boston, they're reading. They're like, what? It's like they know that they can't do and treat everything. They know that their medicines, they can give you a pill to give you energy, but it's a pill. It's not fixing what's going on in the body. The body wants to heal itself. And you've got to find, as the Western medicine, fine, but you've also got to find other things that'll make you feel better and let the body heal itself, which I never would have done if I'd stayed in Boston. So go figure. I look at it as a huge blessing in my life.
And you also talk a lot about your rediscovery of your passion, horses and riding, and how that helped you and how that helped your spirituality. Anything you'd like to share about that?
I will. I'll talk about that real quickly. I was a crazy kid, like a lot of barn rat girls, where they just love horses. That was me. But at age of 15, I gave up horses and didn't ride again for my whole time of raising my sons and living in Boston. And when I was diagnosed, I thought to myself, I better figure out what I really, really love and go do it before I can't do it anymore, which took me to saying I want to go back and ride horses again. When I went to Utah, I started riding again. And they were, again, as maybe some of you in the room know, that now horse therapy is considered a very genuine and legitimate therapy for not just MS, but for all sorts of problems, and autism, cerebral palsy, PTSD, go figure. It's amazing. It's not just the physical part of it, it's the emotional part of it too. So I had, and I think I wrote about it in the book. It's always hard for me to remember what did I put in, what did I leave out. But I had one of those moments when I was riding my horse, and I had now become much more expert and much more advanced rider, where my horse was being really naughty and really reacting to something. I was outside with him, and he was reacting to something. And I had this feeling, and I thought to myself, if he only understood and could see what I see, he would know to listen to me. And in dressage, which is the discipline that I now ride, the whole thing is like the outside rein and the inside leg. So basically, if the horse is submissive to the outside rein, he's obedient to the rider, and then through that obedience comes all this harmony and all these beautiful things. So I was frustrated with my horse, and I was just thinking in my head, this is silly. He's reacting, and he doesn't understand the bigger picture. And he's not being obedient to me, and it's frustrating. And then I had this epiphany, like a parable that came to me, and I thought, this is how we are in life with our Heavenly Father looking down at us. And he's got the big picture. And he knows what's going on. And we don't need to worry so much. What we need to do is listen and be obedient and submissive to that outside rein. And through that, great harmony can happen. And I'm like, that is so cool. I just got taught in a parable. and so that was, again, something that just, happened. And I realized that God loves us, that he teaches us through things that we know and understand and love. For me, it was the horse. And he taught the shepherd. And so it was just intriguing to me that there still can be teaching moments in our life where we can learn. But I learned that I had to listen. And it's really hard to listen because the world is very noisy. And it's really hard to be quiet and be still and to be taught in a very quiet way. So all these lessons happened, and I felt like I had a lot of personal growth through some of the challenges and the hardships that I had to go through.
What's amazing as she's going through all of this, she's describes herself and is described by others as midst stabilizer. So how can you be the stabilizer when you're going through so much? And
it was a turning of the tables. My boys nicknamed me the Mitt Stabilizer because Mitt is very passionate and can be very, he can like explode off into wherever, and I'm very calm. And obviously, raising children, it's a good thing to be calm. And they would see their dad come sometimes just totally fly off the handle. And they were very grateful that they saw me as being the stabilizer in Mitt's life, where I would bring him back and harness some of that energy in a more positive way, especially with 5 really rambunctious boys. So that was, my boys named me the Mitt Stabilizer. So what a turn when I was so sick and Mitt needed to be my stabilizer. But it's interesting how we all step up to fill a need when it's there. And we certainly saw that in our marriage, where Mitt needed to really step up and pull the family together and say, we're going to do this, it's going to be okay, this is the most important thing in my life, is you, and we're going to just make this work whatever that means now, or however different that's going to be, we'll do this, we're in this together, basically.
You open your book trying to explain to us that you really are ordinary and that you have experiences that are relatable to all of us. But I think everybody would agree that you are extraordinary, and the work that you're doing at this chapter in your life with the Ann Romney Center for Neurological Diseases. Tell us about that. I mean, it's an extraordinary investment. It's your mission. How did you conceive of it, and what are you trying to achieve?
I will tell you, Dr. Howard Weiner is one of the top researchers in MS, and he's at the Brigham and Women's Hospital. He is well known throughout the world, really. He lectures everywhere. And I told him, when it looked like Mitt might win, I said, Howard, wouldn't it be wonderful that this could be an initiative that I would help, is to bring more awareness to MS and more research dollars. And we just sort of mentioned it, but it was like you don't want to go down that avenue too far. You don't want to think about it too much. Anyway, fast forward, I'm now in Dr. Weiner's office. It's about a year after Mitt's loss. And I said, it was such a shame, in a lot of levels, that Mitt lost. Yeah, boy, isn't the world fun. But I said, in so many ways, it would have been amazing what we could have done with the research with MS. And he started talking to me. He goes, yeah, there's so many things that are happening right now. And, I'm just making some breakthroughs on some Alzheimer's research, too, which is kind of interesting that my MS research is making breakthroughs in Alzheimer's. And I'm like, excuse me? What are you talking about? And he goes, yeah, it's been fascinating. Dr. Dennis Selkoe, who's head, researcher in Alzheimer's, he and I have been working together, and we've figured out this and that, and we're making some breakthroughs. And I'm like, excuse me? And then he said, yeah, and we're finding a new drug for Parkinson's, and I've got this thing that I think this MS drug actually is now working for brain tumors. And I just came away going, I said, wait. I said, look, I'm not First Lady, but let's look at it this way. Let's just do it anyway. Let's just start it anyway, and let's just see how far it goes. It won't be as big as if I were the First Lady of the United States, but you know what? We can still do something. And so that's how this whole idea started. And then we had a lot of argument. He wanted to name it the Ann Romney Center, and I would not agree to that. I said, no, it's not about me. You guys are the researchers. I don't want my name on it. And after about 4 months of, he finally's like, okay, Ann, it's going to be much bigger if your name is on it, and just stop it. And so I finally relented and let him call it the Ann Romney Center. But what we said is that this interdisciplinary study of these neurologic diseases had brought breakthroughs for him. Let's put them all under one roof. So now in the Ann Romney Center we have research, 250 scientists and researchers looking at Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's, MS, and brain tumors. And I will tell you that I was with Dr. Howard Weiner and Dr. Dennis Selkoe, who are the co-directors of my program. We were in Greenwich, Connecticut 2 weekends ago on Friday night. He told, the doctors themselves said this, that the nasal vaccine that they are developing for Alzheimer's is going to be ready for human trials in the year 2017. So we're very excited about that. It's so huge. We're hoping it's going to work. It's working in the lab. I will tell you, it is working in the lab. The other drug that we're very excited about, it's, by the way, that nasal vaccine is being compounded right now. Another drug that we're compounding right now that will be available, we hope, for human trials by 2017, we're fast-tracking it, is for ALS. For the very first time, a drug. It's working in the labs. It's fantastic. So they are of the opinion that the neurosciences are going to now make enormous breakthroughs where we have not been able to do this for forever. I mean, there have been breakthroughs in heart and lung and cancers, but the neurosciences have not had major breakthroughs. And we are ready to now have that happen. And it is because of the diagnostic tools, the MRI imaging of the brain is extraordinary. The most sophisticated MRI machines will be in the Ann Romney Center on the bottom floor because they're so heavy. So GE is now manufacturing them, and they will be ready, and they'll be the most sophisticated diagnostic tool for research in the world. And that will happen in a year from now in October. So we are getting the tools, we're getting the doctors, we're getting the researchers, and now we just need to let people know what we're going to do, because we are going to tackle these neurologic diseases, and we are going to find treatments, and then we're going to find cures.
Thank you, Anne, for sharing your story in the book and for just go for it. I mean, that's amazing to just do it anyway. We appreciate it for those of us who have loved ones who live with neurological diseases or live with them ourselves. We really appreciate you raising the awareness. And I'm sure there's people out there who want to ask you some questions.
And let me just comment that all of my proceeds go directly to the research center and go directly to research.
We are going to take some questions now. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Cynthia. Terrific talk. We are so glad to have had you. We'll take a couple of questions, and then Mrs. Romney is available in the front lobby to sign books for those of you that purchased them. So let's take our first question from the back row.
Can I stand up? Hello, my name is Pam Edwards, and I want to thank you very much for what you're doing. I also have multiple sclerosis. I've had it over 31 years. I'm still here, and I'm still walking with a cane. And I'm also Mormon. Now, I would like to know, I know that you had mentioned that you have done a lot of alternative treatments such as yoga and reflexology. Are you taking any of the current prescribed drugs for multiple sclerosis?
Okay.
And if so, what are you taking?
Right. You know, I am on, let me just tell you the other thing that's happening. I am in Dr. Weiner's study. He's got a study called the CLIMB study, which takes an MRI every year, does blood work, and they really track. We have about 2,500 patients that are in that study. In that study, there are about a dozen of us that are doing as well as me. And I, and along with the other dozen, are on no medication right now. So, I am grateful for that. It took me a long time to get to the point of being this well. I don't know why I'm doing so much better than some people, but Dr. Weiner wants to find out why. So he pokes and probes me a lot. Like, I get my blood drawn a lot. They do a lot of MRIs. They're trying to figure out why did I respond so well to the steroid treatment. I would call Dr. Weiner on occasion on the campaign trail, and I'd say to him, I'm really not doing so well. I'm really like at the edge of my, and he would just say, take a few days off, and he said, Anne, the thing we know is that you respond beautifully to IV steroids. So he said, don't be afraid, know your limits, don't go past them, but you also know that we know that this drug works for you. Now, the sad part with MS is that every single person with MS responds differently. Copaxone works for one, doesn't work for another. IV steroids works for one, doesn't work for another. It's very frustrating. And all I got to say is the brain is a complicated mechanism. And our own genetic makeup is complicated. So what we're doing and where we're making the progress is mapping the genome. That was huge. Finding our own DNA, figuring out why, okay, this person with those markers is going to do well with this drug. That's where we're going. So pretty soon we'll know, you'll get a blood test and you'll say, this is your drug, Tysabri. And that's going to work. Are you on Tysabri? Yes. It's a very good drug. Thank you.
Next question.
Thank you for all the work you're doing. Recently, when asked about the potential of Mitt Romney coming back into the race, you mentioned that you're assessing the situation. What did you mean by that, and is there any hope?
That makes it sound like we're assessing, like we're really thinking about it. No, I mean, we're assessing it because we're really worried about it. It's really, our country is in a very fragile place, and I think the world is in a very fragile place. And, you know, I wish Mitt could have been there. I think the world would be a different place right now. So we're very worried about what's happening with the Congress right now and with the lack of leadership. We're very worried about that. It's like the wheels are coming off the wagon in every sense of the word. Look what's happening in the world. Look what's happening in the Middle East. Look what's happening with Brazil and the economy that's collapsing there. And it's just troubling. And what we need are leaders that will tell the truth, that will that will have the good judgment and the perspective to understand how to bring and how to educate the population, because so many people really don't understand what is happening and what is going on and how critically important it is right now and how close we are to strategies in the world that are really affecting all of us. And Mitt wrote an amazing book about this, and he said, look, there's a bunch of different strategies besides the one which is the United States and Western Europe model, which is free economies, freedom for individuals. There's another strategy. It's the China strategy, which is a free economy and no personal liberties. There's another strategy, which is in Russia, which is basically totalitarianism and no personal liberties. And who knows what's happening with the economy there. We have oligarchs and a few friends of Putin that are doing quite well. And then we have ISIS and Al-Qaeda. That's another strategy. And that strategy is to destroy everything that we hold dear. One of those strategies is going to work. One of those strategies is going to be successful. And it is not necessarily going to be the American way or the Western European way. And that's where Mitt saw the great danger, is that people not recognizing that we have to be strong, because our way of life and our way of thinking and our way of personal liberties and freedoms doesn't necessarily always have to be there. Great civilizations throughout the history of the earth always collapse. And if we don't make some fundamental changes and get our act together, this Western civilization culture does not necessarily have to be the model that's going to succeed. And so that is why Mitt ran, and that's why it's so frustrating to watch and see what's happening. So it's gotten much worse. We're not over the cliff yet, but we are certainly on the edge of the cliff.
Next question.
Where is your medical research in Boston? I lived there many years. Where are you located?
Okay, we are right across the street from Brigham and Women's Hospital. There, as you go into the emergency room entrance or the doctor's entrance, that little turnaround area, you'll look right to the right, and it's a 12-story building that is being built and will be, it's up now, and they're just finishing off the inside. So it's the Shapiro buildings right across the street, and right next to it is the center.
Next question, back of the room to your right.
Hi, my name's Amy. I was just recently diagnosed with MS about 8 weeks ago. And so do you have any advice for someone so new on this journey that you would recommend, going back your years that you could offer? I mean, whether it be diet, nutrition.
Read my book. And at the back of the book, for those that aren't interested, because a lot of it is just my story, but at the very back of the book is, it's after the book is over, there's another chapter which talks about strategies of dealing with it. And then I have Dr. Weiner really wrote that last chapter. And it's about medicine, and it's about what you do and what you eat and all of those things. So if you read the book, you'll find out my suggestions in there.
Front to your right.
My wife was diagnosed in 2004, and I always remember it was the same year we were married. So, during that time, we've always had a lot of support from our ward and the doctors. And as you said, there was medications we went back and forth through, and now she's on oral medication. But before that, she was doing injections and so on. And she had stopped for a little period of time, and the doctor was really upset about that, and you could tell there was some differences that had occurred. Do you feel a little bit risky for yourself now? I don't know if you feel like a guinea pig, a little risky for yourself now not to be using medication in that period of time where you can, again, feel the effects and not be able to, come back again.
I was very afraid to stop my medications. But I had this German guy telling me, I was on 6 months IV infusions. And I spoke with my doctor, and he and I agreed that we could do a trial period with me not being on medication for a while, knowing that if my symptoms reappeared, I would go right back on them. So I worked with my doctor, and he was fine with me saying, let's try a period without. The steroids were killing me. I really hated them. They were really bad. But obviously, I needed them. So, I think it's always a fine line, and you need to have a really good trust with your doctor. And it is a progressive disease. That's the truth of it. And the other truth is that we are unlocking a lot of mysteries right now through genes and through DNA. So we are going to get much more refined about what medicines will help and how, and then with, okay, now you can be off of them for a while. We're going to get to that point. We're not quite there yet. So it's tough. I know there's always you wish you just knew the answer and you would just do it. But you have to, that's the hard part of this disease, is you're just so unique and you're not the same as everybody else. And it's like the rule book's been thrown out and you've got to just figure it out, and you've got to go on your gut sometimes. And you just end up hoping that you're doing the right thing, and you're never quite sure. So I know how frustrating it is.
Center section to the left.
I know that MS is so different with everybody, like you were saying, but do you feel like, and I know they're doing a lot of medicines that are able to treat MS, but do you feel like they're getting closer to finding a cure for the disease?
Okay, I ask Dr. Weiner that all the time. And he's like, well, I think they don't think a cure is in close sight. They feel like better treatments, for sure. The cure, not so sure. And he said eventually, but not for a long time. I'm sorry.
Our next question right here.
Hi. I have a daughter that was diagnosed 3 years ago with MS, and she did not use any medication. You described many of the symptoms going into your doctor that she was going through as well. She went home, both of us researched the medication and felt that it might be more harmful, so she went with nutrition and supplements. And I'm wondering, will the center be incorporating supplements and nutrition into the program?
All of these things are important, but I have to say too that MS is an autoimmune disease and it's in the brain. And I always tell people you really should get the treatment and find that. And then in addition to that, do these other things, find the good nutrition, do all of the other things that give you your better energy. But if it is a progressive disease, and if you don't treat it, it really can get a hold of you. And that's what they have found, which is so important, is treat early and treat aggressively.
Our next question.
I'll stand up. So for those of us, we bought the book, so it's great to know that the proceeds go to the research. What other ways do you suggest that we get involved in these movements?
I appreciate that. We're all in this together, and it's like, there are people suffering, and it's just to be there and be there emotionally for someone that that's having a hard time, but also, obviously, the money is very important. I will explain the difference with NIH grants, and I will tell you that it costs $50 million to run my center every year. Outrageously expensive. There's 250 scientists and researchers. About 65% of our dollars come from NIH every year, but then we have the rest that we have to raise every year. And so we need philanthropic dollars. So this is interesting. NIH, if they know that you have something that they see as working, they will fund you. But if you think you have a great idea and you're going to try this, which is what my doctors are doing right now, that's how they did the nasal vaccine for Alzheimer's, NIH wasn't going to fund them for that. And so for them to be able to do these really out-of-the-box things, they had to 100% rely on philanthropic dollars. So that is how the system works, is the seed money for really, really experimental things, NIH won't fund. Very important to then have the philanthropic dollars. So unfortunately, money is very important, especially for doctors like what I've got that are just brilliant, that understand what's going on, have all these ideas. They need, obviously they're living on the NIH grants, but I will tell you too, which is not a surprise for any of you, all of you are politically involved in this room, I'm sure, that the federal dollars for things like this are shrinking. We know where they're going to instead, right? Entitlement programs. It's only going to get worse. The dollars for our military, for things like NIH, are going to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink. Just a thought.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take one more question, and then again, I want to let everybody know that Mrs. Romney will be up in the front lobby. She'll be signing books, and we'll go to our last question.
The bulk of the conversation tonight about politics and medicine are two fields mostly dominated by men, but we have two very accomplished women on stage tonight. So my question is, what role and how important is it for women to become more involved in these two fields, and what's the promise that that'll bring?
Do you want to take that?
Sure. multiple sclerosis and neurological diseases affect women, some of them disproportionately more than others. I think it's incredibly important for us all to be activists, and if this is a cause that you're passionate about, to be an activist, whether you're male or female, senior or teenager. I think women going into science, research is incredibly important, as well as entrepreneurs who can help start biotech companies, run biotech companies that can help us find a cure. I think everyone needs to be all in on taking care of each other, because as Anne so graciously pointed out in her book, we are all in this together.
Thank you. Thank you.